The air was a shimmering, boiling soup. Inside the cockpit of his P-40 Kitty Hawk, Flight Lieutenant Jimmy Ryan was already soaked, his flight suit clinging to him like a second skin. Below, the jungle canopy stretched out, a vast rolling ocean of green so dense it looked solid. It was, his squadron leader had warned him, a mattress that'll swallow you whole. "Bandits! 4 o'clock high!" The voice of squadron leader Michael "Blackjack" Davidson crackled through the headset, laced with static and urgency. Jimmy snapped his head around. The sky, empty a second before, was now laced with tracers. 3 sleek, impossibly agile Japanese fighters, A6M-0s, were dropping on them out of the sun. Break right! Jimmy, stay on my wing!" Blackjack ordered. Jimmy slammed the stick to the right, his body crushed into the seat by the G-forces. The Allison engine howled in protest. He was a good pilot, but he was new. This was only his 7th combat patrol over the green hell of New Guinea. The veterans called this area the Slot, a deadly corridor of mountains and jungle patrolled by the best of the Japanese Naval Air Force. He saw Blackjack's plane, emblazoned with a snarling shark's mouth, pull into a tight climbing turn, spitting 50 caliber rounds. A Zero flashed past Jimmy's nose, so close he could see the pilot's helmeted head. "I'm clear, Blackie," Jimmy yelled, pulling up to support him. "Negative, Jim. You've got one on your 6. Jimmy's blood ran cold. He kicked the rudder and threw the P-40 into a violent slip. But the Japanese pilot was a master. The first burst of 7.7mm rounds sounded like pebbles hitting the fuselage. The second burst was a catastrophic cannon-fueled thump, thump, thump. The world dissolved. A 20mm shell exploded inside his instrument panel, sending shrapnel through his right leg. The pain was instant, a white-hot scream that tore the breath from his lungs. Smoke, acrid and oily, filled the cockpit. The engine seized with a sound like a giant tearing a phone book in half. I'm hit! Engine's gone! Get out, Jim! Bail out!" Blackjack's voice was frantic. Jimmy fought the panic. He was in an inverted spin, the green ocean rushing up to meet him. He clawed at the canopy release, but it was jammed. The jungle was no longer a mattress. It was a wall of green spikes. "Mayday, Mayday. I'm going in. Tell Mum." The radio cut to static. From 5,000 feet, Blackjack Davidson watched, his heart a cold stone in his chest. He saw the plume of smoke, a thin black scar against the green, as the Kitty Hawk punched through the canopy and vanished. There was no fireball, no secondary explosion, just silence. The jungle had swallowed Jim Ryan whole. "Davo, did you see?" Blackjack started, his voice hollow. "I saw it, boss. Flight Lieutenant David Davo," O'Reilly's voice replied, tight with a terrible, contained rage. "I saw it." Blackjack fought the urge to dive, to circle the spot, to do something. But the 2 remaining Zeros were looping back, hungry. And below, in that impenetrable green, was the heart of Japanese-held territory. "Form up," Blackjack commanded, his voice dead. "We're going home. RAF Base, Port Moresby, 14th of May, 1943, 16:30 hours. The flight back to the muddy makeshift airstrip at Port Moresby was the longest of Blackjack Davidson's life. The 2 Kitty Hawks landed, their engines sputtering in the oppressive humidity, and taxied to their revetments. The ground crews, seeing the 2 empty spots in the formation, didn't need to ask. Their faces, already grim from malaria, mud, and lack of sleep, tightened. This was New Guinea. This was not the war in Europe. Here the enemy was twofold: the Imperial Japanese Army and the island itself. The Japanese forces, dug in along the northern coast and holding the dense inland mountains, were tenacious, highly disciplined, and fighting on terrain they understood. They held the strategic ground. To the Australians, the island was an alien entity, a place of 15,000-foot mountains, roaring rivers, and razor-backed ridges. And the jungle. The jungle was a living organism. It was a canopy so thick that a man standing on the forest floor could not see a bomber flying 500 feet overhead. It was a place of perpetual twilight, where the air was thick with the smell of orchids and decay. It was home to mosquitoes carrying malaria and dengue, leeches that dropped from the trees, and scrub typhus that could kill a man in a week. The unwritten rule of the air war in New Guinea was simple and brutal. If you go down in the jungle, you are not coming back. There was no formal search and rescue. A pilot who bailed out was listed as missing in action, presumed lost. If he survived the crash, the jungle would claim him. If the jungle didn't, the enemy patrols would. Stories of captured airmen, of summary executions and horrific treatment were whispered in every mess tent. This was the routine. A man was lost. His mates would gather his belongings. The squadron leader would write the hardest letter of his life to a mother or wife back in Australia. The next day, a new pilot would take his place. It was the only way to keep flying, the only way to stay sane. In the operations hut, Blackjack sterilely filled out the after-action report. Aircraft, P-40E Kitty Hawk, serial NAR A29-137. Pilot, FLTJ Ryan. Status, missing in action. Cause, enemy action. Location, approx. 20 miles north of Kokoda. 20 miles north, the base group captain, Harrison, muttered, looking at the map. That's deep in their territory. Deep. He signed the form. He's gone, squadron leader. Make sure your men understand. Blackjack nodded, his face a mask. Yes, sir. But as he walked out into the sticky twilight, past the tent where Jimmy Ryan should have been, he knew this time was different. The routine was a lie they told themselves, and this time, one of his men wasn't going to accept it. The squadron mess was a humid canvas-walled tent that smelled of stale beer, sweat, and kerosene. That night, it was silent. Jimmy's empty chair at the card table was a gaping wound. Davo O'Reilly sat apart, staring into a cup of lukewarm tea. He and Jimmy had joined up together in Sydney. They'd done their training together, chased the same girls, and promised to be each other's best man. Davo was the hothead, the larrikin. Jimmy was the steady one, the kid with the easy smile. He's not gone, Davo said to the table, his voice a low rasp. The other pilots looked away. Davo, mate. Bluey Johnston, the squadron's unofficial padre, started. Don't mate me. He's not gone. I saw the crash. There was no fire, just smoke. He put it down. He's alive. Even if he is, Blackjack said, walking in. He's in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing we can do. So that's it? Davo shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. We just write him off? Buy another round and forget his name? To hell with that? What do you suggest? Blackjack's voice was tired, the authority fraying. Do you want me to send a search plane? We did, for 2 hours. He had. He and another pilot had flown a weather reconnaissance mission, diverting over the coordinates. They grid searched for an hour, engines straining as they skirted the treetops, exposing themselves to ground fire. They saw nothing, just the endless rolling, impenetrable green. It had been a futile, dangerous gesture. We can't send ground troops, Blackjack continued, his voice flat. The nearest AIF patrol is 50 miles south of there. It would be a suicide mission. So he's a routine failure? Davo spat the words. The phrase hung in the air, ugly and true. The system was failing. The routine was to accept the loss. Days turned into a week. The desperation in the squadron became a tangible thing, a rot.
Flights were sloppy, landings were hard. In dogfights, men were hesitant, their killer instinct blunted by the ghost of Jimmy Ryan. They were all imagining it. The crash, the jungle, the slow, lonely end. The routine failure wasn't just the inability to rescue a pilot. It was the slow destruction of the squadron's morale. The mateship that held them together was predicated on an unspoken promise. I will fight for you, and you for me. The jungle had just called their bluff. Davo stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. He spent his hours in the intel tent, staring at the maps, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands shaking with a mixture of rage and malarial fever. He was a man being consumed. He's alive, he would mutter to anyone who came near. And we left him. Blackjack Davidson watched his best remaining pilot disintegrate and knew that the routine was no longer an option. If he did nothing, he wouldn't just lose Jimmy, he would lose his entire squadron. Operations Tent, 22 May 1943, 02:17. Hours. The generators outside hummed a dissonant, grinding tune. Inside the ops tent,
A single yellow bulb illuminated Blackjack Davidson as he stared at the map of the Owen Stanley Range. He hadn't slept in 2 days. The weight of command was a physical pressure, pressing down on his shoulders, making it hard to breathe. The tent flap rustled. Davo O'Reilly entered, looking more like a ghost than a man. "Get out, Davo. You're not rostered for—" "He is alive!" Blackjack finally snapped. "Stop it! Just stop! You're tearing this squadron apart! He's gone! Accept it!" "No." Davo stepped into the light. He was holding a reconnaissance photo, one taken by a high-altitude flight 2 days after the crash. It was blurry, a mess of green and gray. "Look." He slapped it onto the map. "I've been looking at this for 3 days, with the magnifier. Look at the smoke." Blackjack sighed, exasperated, but he leaned over. He saw the faint wisp of smoke from the crash site, just as he'd seen it from the air. "It's a dead fire, Davo. Rain." "No, look, here." Davo's trembling finger pointed to a spot about 500 yards north of the main smoke. It was a clearing, barely visible, a tiny gray speck. And from it, a second wisp of smoke. And here, the day after. And here, the day after that. It's not a forest fire. It's not the wreck. It's a signal. He's alive, Blackie. He's alive, and he's signaling. Blackjack stared. He grabbed the magnifying glass. The specks were tiny, almost imperceptible. It could be anything. Coincidence. Smoldering hot spots. "It's a pattern," Davo whispered, his voice cracking. 3 puffs. V, for victory. He's alive, and he's waiting for us. The unlikely mind wasn't that of a brilliant engineer or a strategist. It was the mind of a man so consumed by loyalty that he would will a pattern into existence. It was the desperate, obsessive hope of a true mate. Blackjack looked at the photo, then at Davo's face, a mask of feverish conviction. The logic was thin, paper thin, but what if it wasn't? What if that kid was out there, in that green hell, waiting? "It's possible," Blackjack conceded, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm going in," Davo said. It wasn't a request. "Don't be a fool. You'd be dead in a day." "Then we go in," Davo countered, his eyes locking with his CO's. "You, me, a ground team. We go and get him." The idea was insane. It was unauthorized. It was against every rule of war. It was, Blackjack realized with a sinking, terrifying clarity, the only thing to do. There's an AIF commando unit. The independent company bivouacked at the dead-end camp, Blackjack said, his mind already turning. "They owe me a favor, and there are the locals, the Papuan Infantry Battalion trackers." "So you'll do it," Davo breathed, the hope surging back into him. "I'll ask," Blackjack said, grabbing his hat. "I'll ask. But I'm not asking the group captain. I'm asking the men who know that jungle." The idea wasn't an invention of steel. It was an invention of pure, stupid, bloody-minded Australian will. It was a plan to punch a hole through the rules of war and pull their mate out. Group Captain Harrison's quarters, 22 May 1943, as 070. Ours Group Captain Harrison was a man who lived by the book. The book kept men alive. The book won wars. He was shaving with a straight razor when Blackjack Davidson, muddy and sleepless, pushed into his tent. "Squadron leader, you're not on the flight roster," Harrison said, not turning. "Sir, it's about Flight Lieutenant Ryan." Harrison sighed, wiping the soap from his razor. "Davidson, I have already signed the letter to his mother. The matter is closed." "I have reason to believe he is alive, sir." Blackjack laid out the blurry photo, the map, the 3 puffs theory. Harrison gave it a cursory, dismissive glance. "Wishful thinking, squadron leader. You're seeing patterns in the mud. I appreciate your loyalty to your men, but I will not sanction a rescue mission based on this. You are pilots, not a search party. Your job is to fly. Sir, with respect, respect would be following orders and not wasting my time with fantasy. You want to march a team 50 miles into Japanese-held territory? Risk a dozen more men, plus the aircraft to insert them, for one man who is, in all probability, already dead? Absolutely not." The skepticism was cold, total, and logistical. It was the voice of command, of hard reality. I am officially grounding Flight Lieutenant O'Reilly for combat fatigue, Harrison added, turning to face Blackjack. And I am ordering you to stand down from this quest. Am I clear, Squadron Leader? Perfectly, sir, Blackjack said, his voice rigid. He collected the photo, saluted, and walked out. The no was absolute. He found Davo by the Kitty Hawks. He said no. Davo's face fell, but the rage returned instantly. Then to hell with him. I'll go myself. I'll walk. You won't have to, Blackjack said, his voice low. The official answer is no. But I've been speaking to an AIF captain, a man named Chuck Fowler, and he's misplaced 2 of his best men. They're going on an extended patrol tonight. Davo's head snapped up. And, Blackjack continued, I was just speaking with WWII Johnston, our medic. He's volunteered to test some new jungle medical kits and needs an escort. And I'm taking a 3-day administrative leave, starting in an hour. This was it. The first steps. It was no longer a request. It was a conspiracy. That afternoon, a small, grim-faced group met in a canvas tent at the edge of the airfield. Blackjack Davidson, the leader, risking his career and his life. Davo O'Reilly, the heart, flying on pure, defiant hope. Sergeant Chuck Fowler, an AIF commando, a tall, silent man who knew the jungle. Corporal WWII Johnston, the medic, carrying a bag filled with sulfa powder, bandages, and morphine. Koa, a Papuan scout provided by Chuck. His face was impassive, his eyes missed nothing. He carried a machete and wore only a lap. He was the most important man on the team. The group captain has forbidden this, Blackjack told them. If we are caught, we are on our own. If we are lost, no one will come for us. This is not an official mission. Doesn't matter, Chuck grunted, checking the action on his Owen submachine gun. It's the right thing to do. Koa just nodded once, pointing to the map. We move at dark. River is faster. This was not a mission of brute force. It was a mission of ghosts. The prototype was the plan itself, a fragile, audacious piece of improvisation. Airfield storage hut, 22 May 1943, 20 Oz hours. The team assembled their gear in the suffocating darkness of a supply tent. Every item was a choice, a gamble. Weight was the enemy. No tins, Chuck ordered, dumping Davo's sea rations. Noise, we take hardtack jerky and salt tablets. That's it. WWII the medic laid out his kit on a ground sheet. It was a grim collection. I've got 6 syrettes of morphine. That's 1 each if we're hit, and 1 for Jim. 50 sulfa tablets, a field surgical kit, and a liter of whiskey. For sterilizing, of course. Of course, Davo muttered, his eyes on the morphine. Blackjack and Chuck were the weapons masters. They carried Owen guns, simple, rugged Australian-made submachine guns that were perfect for the jungle. Davo had his service pistol and a fighting knife. Koa had his machete. They were fast, light, and quiet. The most critical piece of the prototype was the insertion and extraction. I can't get us a plane, Blackjack said. Not officially, but I can borrow one. He had gone to the U.S. Navy Catalina flying boat squadron parked at the far end of the bay. He'd traded 3 bottles of captured Japanese whiskey and a future favor for a navigation error. A PBY Catalina will be flying a coastal patrol tonight, Blackjack explained, tracing a line on the map. It's going to develop engine trouble and fly inland up the Kumusi River. It will drop us here, he pointed. 20 miles from the crash site. We will have 48 hours. Exactly 48 hours. And extraction? Chuck asked. Same plane, same spot. If we are not there at 03 on the 25th, it leaves. No exceptions. The sensory detail of the preparation was a study in tension. The click of magazines being loaded, the smell of gun oil and canvas, the whisper of voices, the sharp, earthy scent of Koa, who watched the white men with patient amusement. You are pilots, Koa said, his voice soft. You fly. This is the ground. The ground does not forgive. You stay close to me. You make no sound. You are shadow. We'll be shadows, Davo promised, his face set. At 23 Tau, the 5 men, their faces blackened with charcoal, slipped out of the tent and moved like shadows toward the coast. They were no longer RAF pilots or AIF infantry. They were a single entity, a desperate hope given form, heading into the dark. Comrades River, New Guinea, 23 May 1943, 01:47 hours. The roar of the Catalina's twin engines dropped to a deep, laboring groan. The cavernous fuselage was pitch black, vibrating so hard it rattled their teeth. The air inside was hot and smelled of aviation fuel. "This is it," the American loadmaster yelled over the noise. "Get on the line." They clipped their static lines. The big cargo door was open, and the night rushed in, a wall of black, humid air. "Good luck, Aussies." The loadmaster slapped Blackjack on the shoulder. "Now go!" One by one, they stepped into the black void. The jolt of the parachute's opening was violent. Then, silence. The engine noise faded. Below them was nothing but a black, textured carpet. The first test was the landing. They hit the water of the Comrades River, a sluggish black serpent cutting through the jungle. The parachutes, soaked, tried to drag them under. They fought the silk, cut themselves free, and waded to the bank, their boots filling with thick, clinging mud. Koa was first out, machete already in hand. He tasted the air, listened. He nodded. "This way, we are safe." They were not safe. The next 24 hours were a descent into a green, living hell. The controlled conditions of their plan evaporated. The jungle was the controller. The heat was a physical weight, a wet blanket that never lifted. Within an hour, they were drenched in sweat. Their uniforms rotted on their bodies. The noise was constant, a deafening, multi-layered orchestra of insects, birds, and things they couldn't identify. "Don't touch anything," Chuck panted, swatting at a mosquito the size of a 5-cent piece. But the jungle touched them. Leeches dropped from the leaves, fastening onto their necks and arms. "Wait a minute," vines, covered in thorns, snagged their gear and tore their skin. They crossed rivers where the current was so strong it nearly swept them away, holding their weapons and medical kit above their heads. Koa moved like a dream. He was silent, his feet finding paths where the others saw only a wall of vines. He was the only reason they were moving at all. The first test was psychological. Davo, wired and frantic, kept pushing the pace. "We have to go faster." "No." Koa stopped him, pointing to the ground. A fresh boot print, not Australian. "Jikatai, patrol. They are close." They froze. The team melted into the undergrowth, not breathing. The sound came. Muffled voices, speaking Japanese. A 6-man patrol passed not 20 yards from their position, their bayonets fixed. The suspense was unbearable. Davo's hand was shaking on his Owen gun. Blackjack put a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Wait." The patrol passed. The jungle was silent again, save for the insects. They had passed the first test. They had entered the labyrinth. But the easy part was over. They were now being hunted. Crash site, Owen Stanley Range, 24th of May 1943. 11 hours after 30 hours of hacking, climbing, and waiting, they found it. The smell hit them first. Spilled fuel, scorched earth, and the sweet, sickly scent of decay. The Kitty Hawk was a ruin. It had sliced through the canopy at a steep angle. The wings sheared off, the fuselage concertinaed against a massive banyan tree. The cockpit was shattered, empty. "No," Davo whispered, his legs giving way. He fell to his knees. "We're too late." "Wait," Koa said. He knelt, touching the mud near the cockpit. He was here. He was dragged. Chuck raised his hand. Silence. The jungle was too quiet. The insects had stopped. "Ambush," Chuck whispered, his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. A single shot cracked through the air. A bullet snapped past Blackjack's ear. "Contact! 3 o'clock!" Chuck yelled, unleashing a burst from his Owen gun into the bushes. The world erupted. Japanese soldiers, hidden in spider holes and behind trees, opened up. They hadn't been waiting for the rescuers. They had been waiting for the pilot to return to the wreck for supplies. "Davo! Blackjack! Covering fire!" Chuck roared. "Bluey, Koa with me! Find him!" This was the real trial. The plan had met reality. Blackjack and Davo pressed against the fuselage, firing in short, controlled bursts. Tracers ripped the air, tearing green leaves to shreds. A Japanese machine gun opened up. its high velocity thump, 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 pinning them down. "We can't hold this!" Blackjack yelled. Meanwhile, Koa and Bluey followed the drag marks, moving low and fast. They found a small hollow, hidden by ferns, and in it was Jimmy Ryan. He was conscious, barely. His leg was a ruin, wrapped in strips of his own parachute, but the wound was festering. His face was a pale, fevered mask. "Knew you'd come," he whispered, his voice a dry crackle. "We're here, mate," Bluey said, his hands already moving, pulling a syringe of morphine. "We're getting you out." "They're coming," Koa hissed, raising his rifle. A Japanese soldier burst through the ferns. Koa fired once. The soldier fell. "Blackjack!" Bluey screamed. "We've got him! He's alive!" The sound of that "alive" hit Blackjack like a physical blow. He felt a surge of adrenaline, of pure euphoric rage. "Davo, on me! We're punching out!" "What's the plan?" Davo yelled over the din. "Plan is, we go through them." It was madness. Blackjack and Davo rose from cover, firing from the hip, walking their Owen guns toward the machine gun nest. The sheer audacity of the move stunned the Japanese gunner. Chook joined them. "Aussie! Aussie! Aussie!" he roared, the old battle cry. The three men became a wall of firepower. The Japanese patrol, not expecting such a ferocious, frontal assault from a team they outnumbered, broke. They fell back into the jungle, disorganized. "Now!" Blackjack yelled. Bluey and Koa had Jimmy on a makeshift stretcher of vines and branches. The 5 men, 6 counting their wounded prize, plunged back into the deep jungle. They were not safe. They were now 6 men, one of them gravely wounded, with an angry enemy patrol hunting them. The extraction was still 16 hours and 15 miles away. The real trial had only just begun. The retreat was a 16-hour nightmare. They moved at a shambling run, taking turns carrying Jimmy, who drifted in and out of consciousness. Every snapped twig, every bird call sent them diving for cover. Koa was their salvation, guiding them on paths they couldn't see, doubling back, covering their tracks. They reached the Kamusi River at 02:45, with 15 minutes to spare. They were covered in mud, blood, and insect bites. They were exhausted to the bone. "Light it," Blackjack rasped. Chook sparked a flare. It hissed, casting a sickly green light on the black water. For a full, terrifying minute, there was nothing. "He's not coming," Davo panted, his hope finally breaking. And then they heard it. The low, familiar drone of the Catalina. It swept in over the treetops, a massive, beautiful shadow, and landed on the water. The side blisters opened. "Took you long enough, you crazy bastards," the American voice yelled. They waded out, pushing Jimmy's stretcher up. Hands reached down, pulling them aboard. The engines roared and the PBY clawed its way back into the air, just as Japanese machine gun fire erupted from the tree line. They were airborne. They were safe. Ray AF Base, Port Moresby, 25 May 1943, 05:30 hours. The base was just stirring when the Catalina, far off its official flight plan, landed in the bay. An ambulance was waiting. When the side door opened and the team emerged, filthy, bearded, walking wounded, and carefully passed down the stretcher bearing a living, breathing Jim Ryan, the entire base stopped. Mechanics, armorers, pilots, and cooks just stared. The domino effect was instantaneous. The news spread through Moresby like a shockwave. A man had been taken by the jungle and his mates had gone in and taken him back. Morale, which had been rotting for a week, didn't just recover, it exploded. The men walked with a swagger. The air was electric. The routine failure had been defied. The impossible had been done. The recognition was more complicated. Blackjack, Davo, Chook, and Bluey stood at attention in Group Captain Harrison's tent. He was standing behind his desk, his face unreadable. Jimmy Ryan's missing in action report was on the desk, right next to the KIA letter Blackjack had been ordered to send. "You are, all of you, a disgrace to the uniform," Harrison said, his voice quiet. "You disobeyed a direct order. You jeopardized a strategic aircraft. You endangered Commonwealth-American relations. You engaged the enemy without authorization, and you abandoned your posts." He paused, walking around the desk to stand in front of them. "It is," he said. the single finest act of soldiering I have ever had the privilege to witness. He picked up the MIA report. Squadron leader, you'll need to file a new report. This one seems to be inaccurate. He then tore the KIA letter in half. You're all confined to quarters for 72 hours for a debriefing. He allowed himself the faintest smile. A debriefing which I believe the officers' mess is supplying several bottles of whiskey for. Dismissed. The Boona Rescue, as the men started calling it, changed the rules. It wasn't just a story, it was a new tactic. Command, seeing the undeniable electrifying effect on morale, had to adapt. Group Captain Harrison, in a report to High Command, conveniently omitted the part where he had forbidden the mission. Instead, he wrote, "The initiative shown by Skarn LDR. Davidson, in coordinating with AIF and PIB elements for a deep penetration rescue, demonstrates a new, vital capability. The psychological impact on air crews cannot be overstated. The field modification was born. RAAF Command quietly formalized what Blackjack's team had improvised. They created air-sea rescue units that were, for the first time, officially tasked with ground rescue. These units began training with the AIF independent companies and the POP-1 Infantry Battalion. A new protocol was established. A downed pilot was no longer a write-off. They were a target for retrieval. Crash sites became in an instant tactical objectives. But the enemy also learned. Japanese intelligence in New Guinea was excellent. They heard the stories. They understood the shift. A downed Allied pilot was no longer a lost man to be hunted down at their leisure. He was bait. Enemy countermeasures were swift and brutal. Japanese patrols began systematically sweeping crash sites, not just for a survivor, but for the rescue party. They booby-trapped wrecks. They set up hidden machine gun nests and waited. Several months later, another pilot went down. The new official rescue team went in, using the Davidson playbook. They were walking into a prepared ambush. The rescue team was lost. The innovation had created a counter-innovation. The war in the jungle became a more complex, deadly chess match. Blackjack's success had proven it was possible, but it had also raised the stakes for everyone who would follow. The bottles of whiskey were emptied. The songs were sung. The backslapping subsided, and the costs began to settle. Jimmy Ryan survived. Bluey's prompt application of sulfa and the morphine had saved his life, but the leg was too far gone. The infection had set in too deep. Army doctors at the Moresby Hospital had to remove it below the knee. His flying days were over. Blackjack and Davo sat by his cot in the stifling heat of the hospital ward. "You shouldn't have done it, Blackie," Jimmy whispered, his eyes on the empty space where his leg had been. "You shouldn't have come." "Don't talk stupid, mate," Davo said, his voice thick. "No, I mean it," Jimmy said. Chook's arm, that American plane. "You all could have been. It was one man. I wasn't worth it." The guilt of the survivor was a heavy, suffocating thing. He had been saved, but he felt broken. For Blackjack, the moral consequences were even heavier. He was now a hero, but he was a hero who had succeeded through blind luck. He sat in the operations tent, staring at the report of the other rescue mission, the one that had failed. 6 men lost, trying to replicate his success. Was Jimmy right? He asked himself. Was it worth it? As a commander, he had risked 5 men for 1. He had disobeyed the logistical, rational chain of command.
He had traded 5 valuable, skilled men, 2 pilots, a medic, a commando, a scout, for a single wounded pilot who could no longer fly. By any military calculation, it was a terrible trade. But Davo, overhearing his thoughts, came into the tent. "You're thinking like Harrison," he said. "You're not counting the right things." "What am I supposed to count, Davo? The bodies?" "No, you count the squadron. You count the men who went up today, flying harder and braver than ever before."
You know why? Because they know. They know if they go down, we're coming. We will always be coming. You can't put a price on that. That is how we win. Blackjack looked at his friend. The unintended cost was the burden of the failed missions that followed. But the unintended consequence was the creation of an unbreakable spirit. He was right. It was the wrong call for an officer, but the right call for a mate. And in New Guinea, mate was the only rank that truly mattered. The war in New Guinea became a bloody, grinding campaign of annihilation. The Allies pushed the Japanese forces back, ridge by ridge, river by river. The names Buna, Gona, and Sanananda would be written in Australian history in letters of blood and mud. Through it all, Blackjack's squadron flew. They strafed, they bombed, they fought Zeros in the high, cold air above the ranges. They lost more men, but they never lost another one to the jungle. The Buna rescue became a quiet legend, a story told over quiet beers from Moresby to Leh. It was the anti-routine. It was the ultimate example of the mateship that defined the Australian fighting spirit. It wasn't a strategic impact that a general in Washington or London would understand. It didn't win a battle. It didn't sink a ship. It did something more important. It gave meaning to the sacrifice. In a war that was often anonymous and brutal, where men vanished into the jungle and were forgotten, the rescue of Jimmy Ryan proved that no one was forgotten. When the campaign for New Guinea finally bloodily concluded, there was a small ceremony at the Moresby base. Blackjack Davidson, now a wing commander, stood before his men. Group Captain Harrison read a citation. For conspicuous gallantry, in defiance of protocol, and in the finest traditions of the Royal Australian Air Force, he pinned the Distinguished Flying Cross on Davo O'Reilly's chest. He pinned a Distinguished Service Order on Blackjack's. Chook and Bluey received the military medal. Koa received a bag of salt and a new knife, which he valued more than any medal. At the back of the crowd, standing on a wooden leg and leaning on a cane, Flight Lieutenant Jim Ryan, now working in operations, rendered the sharpest salute of his life. The legacy wasn't in the medal on their chests. It was in the fact that they were all there, together, to see it. Anzac Day, Sydney, 25 April 1987. The roar of the crowd on George Street had faded. The parade was over. 3 old men sat at a corner table in a pub in the Rocks, their chests heavy with medals that clinked softly as they laughed. Their blazers were dark blue. Their ties were the RAF colors. Michael Blackjack Davidson, his hair white, raised his glass. "To the ones who aren't here." "To the ones who aren't here," echoed David Davo O'Reilly, his hands gnarled with arthritis. Jim Ryan, his prosthetic leg stretched out under the table, smiled. And to Koa, wherever he is. They drank. They were silent for a time, the way only men who have shared the unshareable can be. "You know," Jim said, "I still dream about that jungle. The smell of it. The green. I dream about that bloody Catalina." Davo chuckled. "I thought you were a goner, Jim. I really did." "You were always a hothead, Davo," Blackjack said, sipping his beer. "A terrible pilot, but a good mate." "We were good," Davo said, his eyes distant. "We were something, weren't we?" A young university student working on a history thesis approached the table. "Excuse me, sirs. Mr. Davidson, I'm writing about the air war in New Guinea. I was wondering if I could ask..." Blackjack looked at his friends, and they shared a small secret smile. "Sit down, son," Blackjack said. "Have a beer. Let us tell you a story. It's not in the official histories. It's not about strategy or bomb tonnage. It's about a man who fell and the mates who said, 'To hell with that.'" The Buna rescue never became a famous battle. It remained what it had always been, a quiet, stubborn legend. Historians would later reflect that the Pacific War was won as much by logistics and industry as it was by acts of incredible, irrational courage. It was won by men who, when faced with an impossible green tomb, refused to accept the routine failure. They built a new plan, not from steel, but from loyalty. They tested it in the fire of combat, and in doing so, they cemented a legacy of mateship that defined a generation.